This is a special report from ABC News Digital.
Hello, everyone. I'm Devin Dwyer in New York with this ABC News Digital special report. A military judge has now sentenced Army Private Bradley Manning to 35 years in prison for leaking hundreds of thousands of classified military and diplomatic documents to WikiLeaks. It was the largest leak of military secrets in American history. Right now, I want to bring in ABC's Pentagon reporter Louis Martinez, who joins us from outside the courthouse at Fort Meade. Louis, it's great to see you. What do you make of the judge's sentence?
Well, it's very interesting. The prosecution had wanted 60 years. He faced a maximum of 9 years, but the judge gave him 35 years. The defense had said that they wanted something along the lines of 25 years. But either way, this is much less than we had anticipated. We knew he was going to spend decades in jail. But what was really unclear to us was whether the judge felt that he needed to send a message to him. He had apologized last week. He said that he realized that he had to face some jail time, but he held up hope that he could live a productive life once he got out. It sounds like maybe at least the judge has now agreed with that by giving this kind of a sentence.
Gosh, this is certainly surprising, much more lenient than I think many people thought. And as we understand it, he can be paroled in 12 years. Is that right?
He can be paroled. That is something that we didn't really hear much about during the trial. But given the military's regulations, he can face parole. So he could be out much sooner than anyone had ever anticipated.
All right, and just to recap, so folks that haven't been following this closely, Bradley Manning was convicted on 20 of 22 charges: espionage, theft, fraud. He was not convicted on aiding the enemy, the most serious charge that would have landed him life in prison. Certainly, Louis, as you know this has sparked some intense debate, people calling Manning a whistleblower, others a traitor. You're outside the courthouse. How are his supporters reacting?
Well, actually, off to my left here, there's a group of supporters wearing their very identifiable black T-shirts with the word "truth" written in front of them. He has a dedicated group of supporters who have been showing up relentlessly over the last year for pretrial hearings and finally for the court-martial. I'm certain that they are very glad to hear that he's going to be serving 35 years. I don't think anybody expected basically everybody knew that he was going to be serving jail time. The question really was, how much jail time was he going to face?
That's right. This was really a case not about whether or not Manning did these actions, right? He admitted to leaking these documents back in February. It really kind of was a battle about intentions, right? I mean, what his intent was here?
That's exactly right. The defense never challenged the idea that he had done this. What they presented was the idea that he was a naive young soldier who wanted to change the world, somebody who felt that he had come across these documents during a deployment in Iraq where he was serving back in 2009 as an Army intelligence analyst. He felt that these documents showed what U.S. foreign policy and security policy was all about, and he thought he could change the world. That was the image that his defense attorneys tried to portray. It helped, and maybe in reducing or for his not being convicted on the aiding the enemy charge. The prosecution was relentless in presenting lots of information, the computer trails that showed how just within weeks of having arrived in Baghdad, he was already leaking information in WikiLeaks. They said that he's been portrayed as a whistleblower by his supporters. They said, no, he's not a whistleblower, he's a traitor. But ultimately, in the end, the judge in the case felt that he had not aided the enemy, but that he was guilty of espionage and stealing hundreds of thousands of documents. We're talking about 700,000 military reports and diplomatic cables that he released during a 9-month span to WikiLeaks.
An incredible leak, the largest, we understand it, leak of military documents in American history. Louis, we've heard time and again from prosecutors in this case that this leak did significant damage to national security. Lives were put at risk. Were officials there able to provide any concrete examples of harm done?
That's an interesting question. You know, after the court-martial, they entered a 2-week sentencing phase. This was basically like a mini trial where the defense presented witnesses, the prosecution presented witnesses, and basically the intent here is how much time was he going to serve. And the prosecution wanted, of course, the maximum amount of time. What they wanted was to show that damage had been done. Well, they came in with witnesses, with evidence, and the judge wouldn't allow a lot of it. It was interesting to see that Lind really wasn't buying some of the arguments that were being made about how much damage had been done in terms of physical harm to individuals. They couldn't, the Army couldn't present concrete cases of damage that was done to individuals. And also, with regards to those diplomatic cables that I talked about, one of the things they said, that Lynn said, was that it's hard to prove that there's been lasting damage from the release of those cables. In other words, there may have been some in the immediacy right after they were released, but not since then.
Certainly something the judge must have considered, and also interesting here, as you know, some of the leaked materials did appear to expose potential military mistakes in combat, right? I mean, he revealed a video of a U.S. helicopter attack that killed at least 2 civilians. Did this leak really change any way the U.S. military or the government operates at all?
A lot of what he released was just the day-to-day combat situations in Iraq and Afghanistan. Whenever there's a combat incident, we have battlefield reports that go back to the headquarters. That's really what he sent back. It's very raw, very small amounts of information. But what it portrayed was just what war is really like, or was like, in Iraq and in Afghanistan at the time. It was more the diplomatic cables that really had more of an impact, because it showed what American policymakers at the State Department thought about some of their counterparts in other countries, including some of our allies. That was really interesting. It generated a lot of interest overseas. That's why you see a lot of overseas coverage of the Manning trial. Most of the reporters in here today were from Europe, where the Manning case has been followed very extensively.
All right, if you're just joining us again, we're talking with ABC's Pentagon reporter Louis Martinez outside the courtroom in Fort Meade, Virginia, where a military judge, has just announced a 35-year sentence for Army Private Bradley Manning. Again, he was responsible for one of the largest leaks of classified information in military history. That leak going to WikiLeaks, those documents now online. If Louis is still with us, I just want to ask, Louis, let's talk a little bit about what's next here. Is Manning able to appeal this sentence, or is Judge Lynn's decision final here?
It's exactly like the civilian courts. There's an appeals process. It's just called the Armed Forces Appeal. It could take several years, again, just like in the civilian courts. David Combs, who is Manning's attorney, is going to speak later today to the press. It's the first time that he's taken the opportunity to speak with the press since the trial began 2.5 months ago. And he stated about 2 weeks ago to several supporters that he intended to appeal. And he said he intended to go possibly as high as the Supreme Court. But first, he has to get through 2 military appeals courts. One is the Army Appeals and then the Armed Forces Appeals Court, and then ultimately the Supreme Court if he decides to take it that far.
All right, ABC's Louis Martinez, thank you so much for joining us, and we know that you'll be following this all the way through that process. Great work, Louis. And of course, you can get all the latest on this story and all other news today at abcnews.com. For now, I'm Devin Dwyer in New York with this ABC News Digital Special Report.
This has been a special report from ABC News Digital.